Stickers. Hey. Stickers. Stickers. One more sticker. There you go. Alright, I got more. Anybody wants a sticker? I like light, right? Not everybody does. I like light. But the first thing I start off with is a 6.6 light rod. Why 6.6? Because I've broken a lot of rods on T-tops. Who else has done that? Come on, I know you've done it. Yeah, it happens, right? So I like the 6.6. Some guys like 7, some guys like a little longer. That's fine. It's really up to you. What I tell people when they're choosing a rod for jigging is really just get what's comfortable for you, with one caveat. You want a fast action. You want that tip to go from bent to straight very quickly. And this is a very fast action rod. It takes no time for that tip to go back to straight, right? Why is that? When you're casting a jig and a fish hits it, you're not going to let it eat, right? You're not going to wait before setting that hook. You want to set that hook immediately, instantly. And the fast tip gives you a little bit of an edge in doing that. What about the reel? This is a Shimano C3000 Stratic. This is the new version of the Stratic. I love the old version, and when they came out with this, I was like, oh my God, no, don't take away the Stratic. But I gotta say, I love this one too. It's only been out for about 1.5 years, so I can't state the longevity is as good as the old version. I know that the old version, I've got one that is 6 years old, and all I've ever had to do is repair the roller bearing. It got squeaky, which annoyed me, so I got a new one put in. But that's after 6 years of use on my boat, which means it gets abused, it gets used a lot, it takes a beating. So it's a real good track record. 1.5 years, this one looks great so far, but like I say, I don't know where it's going to look six years down the road. Whichever reel you want to use is fine, right? It's really a matter of personal preference more than anything else. Some guys like to use conventional gear. That's fine too. What about the line? Now this is where I start to make some kind of rules. There are no rules in fishing, right? That's one of the beautiful things about it. Is it, you know, it's not what's right and what's wrong. It's what works today, and maybe it works tomorrow, maybe not. Maybe something else works. But this is kind of a rule in my head, and that's when I'm jigging. I'm always using braid. Always using braid. This is 17-pound Power Pro. A lot of people have a favorite brand of braid. The truth of the matter is it's pretty much all made in the same factory overseas. I forget where it's located, but it's Dynamia line, and the line companies buy it, and they put some different coatings on it and do some different stuff, but most of them are pretty darn similar. So I wouldn't suggest any one brand necessarily over another. Why do I insist on braid with jigs? What do we just talk about with setting the hook? You want to have it fast, right? And what happens with mono? You pull and it stretches, right? You jerk back with the braid, immediately you're setting into that fish. General rule of thumb, right? I'm going to make a big generalization. This is a general rule of thumb. Whenever you're using lures, braid is generally speaking the way to go. Whenever you're using bait, mono is generally the way to go. I'm sure you all know about the increased sensitivity with braid, right? You can drop braid down 800 feet at the edge of the continental shelf, and if a tilefish sniffs your bait, you feel it. It's amazing. Mono, you can have a 10-pound fish on the line and never even know. And I've done that. Reeled it up and go, whoa, look at that. Total surprise. So whenever I'm casting lures, I'm using braid. When I'm chumming, this is one of my favorite chumming rigs right here. I'm using the mono. And one of the things that folks who have read my books hopefully have picked up on is that I don't give you thoughts. I give you what I know to be fact. When I say that I do this, it's because I spent an entire season chumming with mono on one half of the boat and braid on the other half of the boat. The mono out-caught the braid consistently by about 30%, 30-35%. The mono catches more fish when you're using bait. Why? Well, the fish grabs it, it mouths it, it has a second or two to kind of see what's going on, and if you got braid on, he feels that resistance that much more. So they spit the bait a lot more often. All right, so that is the rod, reel, and line. Any questions on rod, reel, and line before we go to lures?
One question on the braid. Do you think color makes a difference?
I don't think color makes an iota of difference. Now, you
Don't give him the red line.
I gotta do it. I gotta do it. How many of you have already heard this story? One, okay, well, that's not too bad. So,
I'm sorry.
here's where my general thoughts on line come from. We're going back 20 years ago. I'm writing for Boating Magazine. I go on a press gig down in Florida. They invite down a bunch of writers to test a bunch of products, right? And one of the companies there was this brand new company at the time called Cajun Red. Everyone's seen Cajun Red, right? It's this red fishing line. And I look at this stuff and I'm going like, oh, that's kind of wacky. And the PR rep came over to me and he said, let me tell you about this. What happens is you cast out your lure, it sinks down through the water column, and red is the first color to disappear as it sinks through the water column. I thought, oh, interesting. We went fishing with it. We caught fish. It worked just fine. And when I got home, I did some research and I found that he was telling the truth. Red is, in fact, the first color to disappear, and it starts to fade out at just a few feet. By the time you're down, I think it's 10 feet, it's completely colorless. So I thought that was interesting. Well,
Come on in.
fast forward maybe 5-6 years, Pure Fishing bought Cajun Red. Pure Fishing puts together a similar gig down in Texas. We're going to fish for reds and specks in the Gulf. I go down there with a bunch of other people, and at one point the Pure Fishing rep comes over to me. He says, hey, you seen this Cajun Red? And before I could say a word, he says, here's what happens. You tie your lure on the end of this red line, you cast it out, it sinks down through the water, fish see the red line, follow it to the lure, and eat it. The Cajun Red worked. My big takeaway was never, ever, ever believe the PR guy, no matter what he tells you. Always double check. But the fact of the matter is, the fish ate right off of that red, whether it was on top, it was down low, didn't matter. You can see right here, I have my jig tied directly to the braid. This is fresh off the boat. I grabbed this out of the rod rack. Tied directly to the braid, does not deter the fish one bit. Now, a lot of guys say, wait a minute, Rudow, you got to have your leader there. Where's your leader? Well, I generally don't fish leader when I'm fishing for rockfish with jigs. There's a couple downsides. The first is, if you try and swing a big fish, you may well cut yourself, right? That braid will cut a wet finger. Second downside is braid is not nearly as abrasion resistant. And this is another thing I had to test for myself, because when I started hearing people say mono's more abrasion resistant, I was thinking, BS. So we actually performed this test in this store. We got a grappling anchor with 3 rusty rebarb tines, and we took braid, stroked it against it, and then tested the braking strength. Took mono, stroked it against it, and then tested braking strength. We did that with 3 different brands, with 3 different sizes. And yes, absolutely, truly, it's for real. Mono has much better abrasion resistance. Toothy fish, right through this. Abrasion against structure, right through this. Fishing for sea bass on a wreck where you know you're going to get scratched up a lot, you got to have mono there. But for rockfish in the bay, where there's really very little abrasion going on, I tie direct. What's the upside? I got one less knot between me and the fish.
Well, you can't tie a loop knot in that braided line, though.
You cannot.
You can't catch as many fish.
And the Florida guys love their loop knots. They truly believe it gives the lure more freedom of motion. I personally can't tell one iota of difference. That's just me, but that's, you know, you catch plenty of fish with a tie direct. I've tried it with black, with fire line. As far as I can tell, there really, truly is no difference. It's not something that the fish notice.
But you want to apply color to lure. Sometimes color and lures make a difference.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that. That's actually the next thing I was going to talk about. But with the line, I have been unable to convince myself there's any sort of difference. Look, when braid first came out, Fireline was the first one around. It was black. Everyone remember the black Fireline when it first came out? I lived in Easton, and I had a pond behind my house, and I looked at that stuff, and I said, no fish in its right mind is ever going to bite anything tied to it. And to prove it to myself, I tied marabou jigs on it, and I walked out to my pond, and after dinner, I'd always walk out there and just kind of unwind at the end of the day and catch a few crappie. And so I started doing it with taking a few casts with the Fireline and taking a few casts with 4-pound Berkeley Tri-Line XL, which was always my favorite ultralight line for freshwater. 50-50. Made no difference whatsoever. And crappie can get quite line shy. Lures, okay. What's this? Who knows what this is?
So, what knot do you use to tie that lure?
Palomar, 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 Palomar. You tie a fisherman's knot in this stuff, it'll fall right off. I don't care if you make 20 twists. Got to do a Palomar. Braid direct to anything solid has got to be a Palomar. Swivels too. And if you're not sure how to tie a Palomar, do you know Palomar?
Sure.
Okay, good. Okay. Just for everyone else, if you go to YouTube and you search for Rudow Palomar Knot Boats.com, you'll find a video on how to do it. So, so I never got to answer. What is this? Come on, everyone knows what this is, right? It's a BKD, right? Okay, so this is my number one go-to bait right here as it sits. It's chartreuse, it's a BKD. Why do I love the BKDs? Honest answer, they're cheap. Seriously, they're really, really cheap. And they catch fish. You know, my humble opinion, there's not a hell of a lot of difference between these in how many bites you're going to get. Many of the plastics have very similar results as long as the size and the colors are equal. All right? So I go less expensive unless bluefish are around, in which case I use
Yeah, they're gone.
yeah, Z-Mans, right? Z-Mans are a royal pain in the butt. It is tough to get them up on a jig head, but you can sit there and go "Arr, arr, arr," all day long, and you will not be able to bite through a Z-Mans. I have tried it. They're good for 5, 6, 8 bluefish. So when bluefish are around, you save the BKDs, you go to the Z-Mans, and you end up saving money. However, when I get really, really desperate, when things are not good, and I want every little edge I can get, I go to a Berkeley Gulp 4-inch jerk shot. The Gulp, in my experience, absolutely positively causes the fish to hold the lure longer. I don't think you get more hits, but when a fish grabs that stuff, they like to hold on to it. They will eat it if you let it sit on bottom. I've caught croaker when I had a tangle in my reel with a Gulp on the line because they just ate it. They love this stuff. Should I tell my Gulp story?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to tell the Gulp story. So,
I thought they were 5-inch though. But I could be wrong.
I think they're 4. Are they 5? I don't know. We should check a packet back there. So does this Gulp stuff really work? So I had the opportunity one time to fish with Dr. John Prochnow, who is Berkeley's head science guy. And he's a pretty intense guy. And he loves fish and fishing. He's got a big giant tank in his laboratory, probably about half the size of this room. In it are a bunch of fish and a little remote-controlled boat. And the way they tested Gulp and they came up with the formulas was they took cotton balls, dipped it in the chemical compounds they were playing with, tied them off on the little boat, and then drove the boat around in a circle and saw what, which the fish ate. They would time it with a stopwatch and see how long the fish held on to it. So I asked him, well, how'd you get to your final composition for the Gulp baits? And he said, well, one day this bass came up, grabbed the cotton ball, would not let go, shook its head, and would not let go until the cotton ball ripped off the line, and it ate it. And I thought, we got something here. And he said he went home at the end of the day, and then the next day he came back in the morning and flipped on the lights in the laboratory, and he looked up and there's a bass sitting there, and it pooped out the cotton ball, turned around, sniffed it, and ate it again. He said, at that moment, I knew I had it right. And that truly is where the formula for Gulp, that's when they stopped. That's when they said, we got it. So like I was saying, when I'm desperate, I go to the Gulp. Again, I'm not sure it gets you more hits, but I'm absolutely positive you can be a little slower. Nobody's perfect, right? Everybody misses the hook set now and again. They just react a little slow. It gives you another, I don't know, half a second, maybe a second, before that fish spits the lure out and goes, something's wrong. And it gives you a chance to really set the hook and get the fish.